This is my new CNC table. But as you can see, this is a very versatile table and can be used for multiple things in your shop. You could use it as an outfeed table for your table saw. You could use it as a workbench. It's mobile to move around your shop, and it even has a storage shelf underneath. So let me show you a few more of the details and show you how I made it. At the time I built this project, 2x4s were something like $7 a piece. So I thought I would save a few bucks and buy 2x8 by 10 footers, and that would give me plenty of what I needed for material. I was just going to rip them down on my table saw, which is what you see me doing here, and then I would end up basically with 2x4s. Look, Mom, I made 2x4s. So at this point, I've got all of my 2x8s cut into 2x4s. I'm gonna take them over to the miter saw and cut them into my individual pieces. I cut them all to length at the miter saw, and it made it really easy because I was able to do this one operation and get pretty much all of the pieces for this build. If you're interested in building one of these tables for your shop, I'll have detailed plans for free on my website, so be sure to click the link in the description below, go check them out, download them, and build one for your shop. I bought the 2x8s so that I could save a couple bucks, and ended up turning into a decent amount more work. I will definitely make sure in the plans to just have the measurements for standard 2x4s if you want to go that route. I do think you end up with a little bit better material using a 2x8. They just seem to be a little bit straighter. So for whatever it's worth. For the construction of these, I'm going to be using butt joints. I'm putting 2 screws in each of the joint sections here. And just to explain a little bit, this is long grain to long grain. So there's a lot of friction when those 2 screws go through and hold the pieces together. So it's actually quite a strong joint. I'm not going to use any glue to assemble this because if I ever have to modify it or change it or replace the top at some point, I want that to be as easy as possible. I'm just using 2.5-inch screws here, and I'm countersinking them below the surface just a little bit. After you assemble one side, do the other side exactly like it. Then you'll have 2 identical sides, and you can use the longer pieces to join them together. Remember, you're not going to use one of the longer pieces on the lower side of the front of the table. This is going to be inset so that the shelf on the inside will only cover about half of the distance. You see me taking time to mark out where I'm actually going to place the screws. You don't have to do this. I just decided it was worth a couple extra seconds so that everything was lined up just right. I used a clamp to get it in place while I got one screw in there. Then I was able to remove that clamp and drive in the other screw. It's more of the same attaching the long pieces to the 2 different sides until you get the entire structure, basically a box, built. These screws technically don't need pre-drilling, but I didn't want to take any chances. I was drilling really close to the edge of most of these boards, and I didn't want them to split. I'm making some good progress on the table. I'm getting a pretty good structure going here, but I realized that I messed up, so let me show you. The MDF sheet comes in 49-inch width by 97 inches rather than the 4 foot by 8 foot. It's an extra inch either way. When I drew everything up, I was calculating using the entire 49 inch width so that I would not have to do but one cross cut. But I forgot that I was sandwiching these in between the two side pieces. So I made these 49 inches. And what that did was, if I go all the way from the back to here, that's 51 inches because of the thickness of this. So not a problem. I ended up just using some of the spare pieces I had left over right here and here and here, kind of scabbed them into the back side there. So from about the midway of that to the front of this, I've got plenty of room, 49s right here. It's gonna work just fine. I will definitely adjust this for the plans. This is just kind of one of those I'm learning as I'm going, but when I draw the plans up for this, it will have everything adjusted to where it'll work out just right.
Next, I turn my attention to the lower shelf. So a few of the reasons that I'm making the lower shelf only half of the full thickness of this piece. I plan on using a dust extractor for the CNC, and it needs a place to nest underneath. Plus, I wanted plenty of room for my feet and or legs if I pulled a stool up to sit and watch the CNC for a few minutes. That's why I made the shelf only halfway, and it's still plenty deep to hold a lot of materials.
I needed a little bit more for the casters to grab onto on the bottom. So I got some blocks. I'm gonna put them here. I dressed them up with a little bit of an angle, just like 30 degrees. Cut that on there just to make it look a little bit different. So I'm gonna secure these here, and that way these will have plenty of room to secure the casters. On the back, there's plenty of room because there was actually an extra board with the way the assembly went together. But since this front piece did not have you know, the piece that goes across, it needs a little something else.
At this point in the build, we're almost done with the structure. I just need to put a couple of cross pieces so that the MDF top has plenty of support. As you'll see from the plans, I was able to get all of this structure from 3 2x10 by 10 foot pieces. If you're using 2x4s, it will just take 6 of them. I'm using a clamp to hold everything in place while I drive the screws home, and I did again take a couple of seconds to mark out where the screws will go in a vertical line. These screws on the front will show, and I just wanted them to look lined up. Because I actually ripped these down, they had sharp sides to them, so I took a quick moment, used a 1/8 inch router bit, and just rounded over all the edges that I would potentially touch. Then I gave everything a quick sand just to make it look a little bit better. Now it's time to turn my attention to the top. If you don't have some of this rigid foam to use with a track saw or a circular saw, I highly recommend you picking some up. It's really safe and easy to cut an entire sheet of something like this MDF with the support that you need underneath. If you cut into it, it's fine, it's sacrificial, but that's what I use and it seems to do a really good job. I only had to make a single cut here, and that's why I designed them this way. I just needed the cut so that the piece would end up at 60 inches by 49.
I've got the workbench flipped over now because I'm gonna put these casters on. I was gonna do the MDF first, but realized how heavy it made it, and I didn't wanna have to flip this thing over while all that weight was on it. So I'm gonna put these on here, just screwing them into the bottom, and then I'll flip it back over and I can get going with the MDF.
This thing had already gotten to be pretty heavy, so I was sure to lock the wheels before I tried to flip it over. I didn't need this thing running out from under me and slipping as I'm trying to flip it. Then I unlocked everything to kind of move it out of the way so that I could work on the bottom shelf.
I needed to notch out the back two corners for the bottom shelf so that it would go around the vertical legs. To do this, I just marked in each direction where I would need to cut and then connected those with a combination square. I need to cut out these corners so it will fit around the legs of the table. You could easily do that with a bandsaw. These pieces are a little bit big for that. Maybe the small one would be okay, but I'm just gonna use a handsaw, knock it out real quick, use a jigsaw, whatever you want. The top side of this pull saw actually has fine teeth, and so what you see me doing right here at the end is just cleaning up that cut a little bit where I strayed from the line. Adding the shelf back to the structure is not very difficult. I just made sure to line everything up with the front edge since that will be seen the most, but there was one important part. Since I'm having to use two pieces for the lower shelf, I wanted to make sure that I would hit one of the cross members so that I could sink a couple of screws in there. So I just needed to make sure that I was going to have each piece end on one of those cross supports so that I could get screws into it. And for attaching the MDF, I switched to 1¼ inch screws. I only really need to countersink below the surface a little bit, and there doesn't need to be tons of holding pressure, just enough that it's not going to be slipping around. As you saw on those center structures, I just had to angle those slightly to make sure that I could get each piece of that MDF to hit into the structure. I put a couple of clamps down just to hold it in place while I grabbed my trim router and put a light round over on the edge, but I forgot something. Be sure to wear a dust mask when you're doing this stuff. MDF is nasty stuff, and you can see it just sprayed dust everywhere. There were a couple places that the MDF was a little bit proud of my structure, so I just grabbed a flush trim bit before I did the round over and made sure everything was flush. This could have just been some warp in the boards or whatever. It wasn't very bad out, but I wanted to take care of it before I secured it with screws. For securing the top, I used the same 1¼ inch screws, and I happened to just draw some lines where my structures were so that I could be sure to hit them with all the screws, and then took a little bit of time and spaced each of the screws about 10 inches apart. It's arbitrary. There's no real reason I did that other than I just wanted even spacing to look as good as it could. That's it for this one, guys. Thanks so much for checking it out. As you can see, I'm going to be setting up my CNC to go on here, but this could easily be used as an outfeed table or a workbench. It's a nice big flat steady thing. Doesn't cost a lot, simple to build. Again, I put the half shelf because I plan on being able to walk right up to it and reach way back to reach things. Might even sit in front of the CNC at times on a stool. I'm offering free plans for this workbench. If you'll click the link down in the description below, it'll take you to my website and you'll be able to download those. I made the plan so you could use dimensional lumber, standard 2x8s, or you can switch it up if you want to. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.